It's just perfect, honestly.
Oh, you two look absolutely wonderful together.
I found out my parents had sold my lake house inheritance because my sister was standing under a white wedding arch, laughing beside a gold sign that said, "Thank you, Mom and Dad, for making my dream wedding possible." Then I saw the framed photo on the gift table, Madison and her fiancé smiling in front of the lake house that was supposed to be mine. For a moment, the whole backyard blurred. The white roses, the champagne glasses, the soft music drifting from rented speakers, all of it folded into one sharp, impossible sound inside my chest. I had come to my parents' house in Portland to help with a small pre-wedding dinner. That was what my mother called it on the phone. Small. Simple. Family only. But there was nothing simple about the crystal lights hanging from the maple trees. Nothing small about the private chef moving across the patio. Nothing casual about the glossy brochures scattered near the dessert table, each one showing a luxury resort in Hawaii with oceanfront villas and sunset ceremonies. My sister Madison saw me first. "Claire," she called, smiling too brightly. "You made it." She was 28, wrapped in a cream silk dress, her blonde hair swept over one shoulder like she had stepped out of a bridal magazine. Beside her, our father, Richard Bennett, lifted a glass toward the guests with the satisfied face of a man who expected applause for every decision he made. My mother, Susan, stood near him, dabbing at her eyes as if generosity had exhausted her. I did not look at them first. I looked at the photo. The lake house sat under tall pines, its green shutters faded by weather, its front porch leaning slightly to one side. To anyone else, it might have looked old. To me, it looked like summer mornings with Grandma Margaret, chipped mugs of cocoa, worn quilts, and her voice telling me that one day, when the world felt too loud, that house would be mine. I picked up the brochure with cold fingers. Madison stepped closer. "Isn't it beautiful? We are doing the ceremony in Maui. Mom and Dad wanted to give me something unforgettable." Something moved in my stomach. Slow. Heavy. "Where did the money come from?" I asked. The smile on her face flickered, then returned thinner. "Dad said, your mother and I made a family decision." A family decision. In our house, those words never meant family. They meant I had been left out until it was too late to object. They meant Madison wanted something, my parents found a way to provide it, and I was expected to be grateful for the privilege of not complaining. My mother touched my arm. "Claire, not today." I pulled away gently. "Why is Grandma's lake house on your gift table?" My father's jaw tightened. "Because it finally helped someone who needed it." The words landed harder than a slap. "Needed it," I repeated. Madison crossed her arms. "Claire, please do not make this weird. It was just sitting there. Nobody used it." I stared at her. "Nobody used it because Grandma is in hospice." The backyard seemed to quiet, though the music kept playing. A cousin looked over. A server paused with a tray of sparkling water. My mother's eyes sharpened with warning. Richard stepped closer. "Keep your voice down." "No," I said, and my voice surprised even me. "Where is the house?" His face changed then. Not guilt. Irritation. As if the problem was not what he had done, but the fact that I had noticed. "Sold," he said. "We sold it." For 1 second, I could not breathe. The lake house had not just been property. It was the one place where I had never been second choice. In that house, Grandma let me speak without correcting my tone. She let me be quiet without calling me cold. She remembered what I liked, what I feared, what I dreamed of becoming. And my parents had turned it into flowers, flights, and Madison's perfect sunset pictures. "You had no right," I whispered. Dad's eyes hardened. "Your grandmother is not in a position to manage these things." That was when I saw it. On the side table, beneath a stack of envelopes, lay a folder from a title company. I reached for it before he could stop me. Inside was a copy of the sale document. My father's signature sat at the bottom. Beneath it were the words, acting on behalf of Margaret Holloway. My blood went cold. Grandma signed this? I asked. No one answered quickly enough. Madison looked down. My mother pressed her lips together. My father's hand tightened around his. Glass. That silence told me everything. I closed the folder with trembling hands. Grandma promised that house to me. My mother's voice softened in that dangerous way she used whenever cruelty needed perfume. Claire, your sister is starting a life. You are already doing fine. There it was. The family rule carved clean into the air. Madison was allowed to need. I was expected to survive. I looked at my sister, standing under rented lights bought with stolen memory. I looked at my parents, calm enough to call betrayal practical. Then I tucked the folder under my arm. Dad said, "Do not you dare upset your grandmother." I turned toward him. If she approved this, I said, you have nothing to fear. Then I walked out of the backyard while the music played behind me, soft and pretty, like a lie dressed for a wedding. The drive to hospice felt longer than the distance on the map. Portland's afternoon traffic crawled beneath a gray sky, and every red light gave my mind another chance to replay my father's face. Not ashamed. Not frightened. Annoyed. As if I had walked into his story at the wrong time and ruined the scene he had carefully arranged. By the time I reached the hospice center, my hands were stiff around the steering wheel. I sat in the parking lot for a moment with the title company folder on my lap. The paper looked harmless. White sheets. Black ink. Clean margins. But some betrayals do not arrive screaming. Some come printed, signed, and filed. Grandma Margaret's room was at the end of the east hallway, where the windows faced a small garden with lavender bushes and a stone birdbath. The nurses kept her door partly open because she hated feeling shut away. When I stepped inside, she was lying beneath a pale blue blanket, smaller than she had been even 3 days earlier. Her silver hair was brushed neatly away from her face. Her hands rested on top of the blanket, thin and still. But her eyes opened before I spoke. What did he sell? She asked. Not hello. Not are you all right. What did he sell? That was when my throat closed. I moved to the chair beside her bed and placed the folder gently on the blanket. Her gaze dropped to it. She did not reach immediately. For a few seconds, she only stared, as if she already knew that touching it would make the wound real. The lake house, I said. Her face did not break. That almost broke me instead. She lifted one hand and opened the folder. Her fingers shook, but her eyes moved steadily across the page. She read the address. The sale amount. The title company name. Then she reached the line where my father had signed beneath the words acting on behalf of Margaret Holloway. Her breath changed. I never signed this, she said. The room seemed to tilt. I had imagined pressure. I had imagined confusion. I had imagined my father standing beside her bed, speaking in that heavy voice of his until she was too tired to argue. But this was worse. He had not bent her will. He had replaced it. Grandma, I whispered, did you know anything about this? She closed the folder with one slow motion. No. The word was quiet, but it carried the weight of a door locking. Then her eyes lifted to mine. Claire, open the drawer. I obeyed. Inside the small bedside drawer were tissues, a prayer card, a pair of reading glasses, and an old address book with a cracked brown cover. The blue card, she said. I found it tucked between 2 pages. Arthur Bell, attorney at law. The edges were worn soft, as if she had kept it for years for a day she hoped would never come. Call him, she said. My hand hovered over my phone. Now? Her eyes sharpened. Especially now. I dialed. Arthur answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was calm, older, careful. I told him who I was. Before I could explain everything, Grandma reached for the phone. "Arthur," she said, "this is Margaret. Bring the sealed lake house file." There was a pause on the other end. Then she added, "Richard sold it." The silence that followed was not confusion. It was recognition. 40 minutes later, Arthur Bell walked into the room carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a dark gray suit that looked too formal for hospice and exactly right for war. He was in his late 60s, tall, spare, with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. A young woman followed him with a tablet and 2 folders pressed against her chest. "Margaret," he said gently. "Arthur," Grandma replied. "I wish I were surprised." He took her hand first, not the folder. That small act told me he had known her long enough to understand she was still a person before she was a case. Then he looked at me. "You must be Claire." I nodded. He opened the larger folder on the rolling table beside her bed. Inside were photographs of the lake house, a property map, notarized documents, and 1 sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Grandma's careful handwriting. My chest tightened. Arthur placed 1 document in front of me. "This addendum was executed 3 years ago," he said. "It specifically designates the Bend Lake House to Claire Bennett. It also prohibits sale, transfer, mortgage, or long-term lease without Margaret's direct written authorization and Claire's written refusal." I stared at the page. My name was there. Not spoken. Not implied. Written. For most of my life, my family treated my place among them as negotiable. But here, in black ink, Grandma had made me undeniable. "I never refused anything," I said. Arthur's expression darkened. "We know." Grandma pointed weakly to the sealed envelope. "Read it," she said. Arthur hesitated. "Are you sure?" Her voice turned thin and sharp. "They used my illness as permission. I want my words used as evidence." Arthur opened the envelope. "If Claire is hearing this," he read, "then Richard and Susan have finally mistaken my silence for surrender. I have watched them take from the daughter who complains the least and call it family balance. I have watched Madison receive what Claire was told to release. The lake house is not just wood, land, and windows. It is the first thing I protected because Claire deserved one place in this family that nobody could hand to someone louder." My eyes burned so fiercely that the room blurred. Grandma looked at me. "You were never less loved, sweetheart. You were just easier for selfish people to rob." Then my phone lit up. "Dad." I did not answer. A message appeared seconds later. "Do not involve lawyers in family matters." Grandma saw it. So did Arthur. She held out her hand. "Give me the phone," she said. I placed it in her palm. Her fingers trembled as she pressed call, but her voice did not tremble when my father answered. "Richard," she said, "you have until morning to undo what you stole." My father arrived at hospice at 7:20 that evening, not quietly, not humbly, not like a son visiting his sick mother. He arrived like a man entering a room he still believed he owned. I heard him before I saw him. "I am her son," he said from the hallway. "You cannot keep me from my mother." Arthur Bell was already standing near the window, calm as stone. Grandma had asked him to stay, and now I understood why. She knew Richard Bennett better than any of us. She knew he would mistake a softer voice for weakness, a hospital bed for surrender, and family blood for legal permission. My mother came in behind him, clutching her purse against her stomach. Her eyes were red, but I could not tell whether she had been crying from guilt or fear. Madison followed last. Her silk dress was gone. She wore jeans, a cream sweater, and the wounded expression she used whenever consequences approached too close. Dad looked at Grandma first. Then at Arthur. Then at me. "You are proud of yourself," he said. "No," I answered. "I am awake." His mouth tightened. My mother stepped forward. "Claire, sweetheart, this has gone far enough. Grandma's voice came from the pillow. No, Susan. It has finally gone far enough to be named. The room fell still. Dad gave a short, humorless laugh. Named? We sold an unused cabin to help Madison start her marriage. That is what families do. They support each other. Whose family? I asked. His eyes snapped toward me. Grandma lifted one thin hand. Richard, do not look at her like that in my room. That stopped him. For the first time in my life, I saw my father hesitate because a woman he could not intimidate had spoken too clearly to ignore. Madison moved closer to the bed. Grandma, I did not know it was Claire's. Dad said you wanted to help. Grandma looked at her for a long moment. Then why did you never call to thank me? Madison opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes dropped to the floor. The silence answered better than honesty would have. She had not called because she had not wanted confirmation. She had wanted the wedding. She had wanted the lights, the ocean, the photographs, the applause. The source of the money had only mattered if someone forced her to look at it. Arthur placed the lake house addendum on the rolling table. The paper made a soft sound, but everyone in the room reacted as if something heavy had fallen. This document, he said, was signed, witnessed, notarized, and attached to Margaret Holloway's estate plan 3 years ago. The Bend Lake house is specifically designated to Claire Bennett. It cannot be sold or transferred without Margaret's written authorization and Claire's written refusal. My mother's face drained of color. Dad pointed at the paper. Mom was not thinking clearly when she signed half of those things. Grandma's eyes sharpened. I signed that before hospice, Richard. Before your excuses had somewhere convenient to hide. The words hit him cleanly. For 1 second, he had no answer. Then he found anger again. You are letting a lawyer turn you against your own family. Grandma turned her head toward Arthur. No. He is writing down what you did before you rewrite it. My mother began to cry then. Real tears, maybe. But I had learned young that tears did not always mean remorse. Sometimes they meant the person crying had finally realized the room no longer belonged to them. Claire, she said, looking at me, you know we would never intentionally hurt you. I almost smiled. It would have been easier if they had hated me. Hatred has clean edges. This was worse. They loved me only when loving me cost them nothing. The house had my name on it, I said. She looked away. That was her confession. You knew, I whispered. Susan pressed her fingers to her lips. I knew your grandmother had talked about it. Talked about it. Not protected it. Not signed it. Not made it legal. Just talked about it, because spoken promises were easier for my parents to bury. Grandma pointed to the second folder. Arthur read the inventory. Dad went still. So did Mom. Madison looked between them. What inventory? Arthur opened the folder. His voice stayed calm. Claire's college fund, partially withdrawn to cover Madison's first apartment deposit. Claire's pearl necklace, gifted by Margaret, later transferred to Madison for graduation photos. Claire's lake house, protected because repeated family conduct showed a pattern of redirecting Claire's designated property toward Madison. My breath caught. I remembered the necklace. Grandma had given it to me in a small velvet box. A month later, Madison wore it in a family picture. Mom said I was being dramatic when I asked for it back. Dad told me jewelry should be worn by someone who enjoyed attention. Grandma had noticed. All those years, when I thought silence had swallowed me whole, she had been keeping record. Dad's face hardened. This is ridiculous. No, Grandma said. Ridiculous is stealing from the quiet child and calling her selfish when she finally hears the lock break. Arthur turned another page. There is also a misconduct clause, he said. If Richard or Susan Bennett attempts to sell, conceal, transfer, or convert designated property without written consent, All discretionary inheritance set aside for them may be revoked and redirected into a trust for Claire Bennett. My mother stopped crying. Madison's eyes widened. How much money are we talking about? No one answered. But my father's face did. Enough. Enough to make the wedding look small. Enough to make my mother afraid. Enough to prove that the lake house had never been about helping Madison. It had been about control. Dad looked at Grandma, and for the first time that evening, his voice lost its volume. Mom, do not do this. Grandma stared at him from her pillow, weak in body, unshaken in spirit. Richard, she said, I gave you years not to become this moment. Then she turned to me. And Claire, I am sorry I waited until now to let you see how much power you always had. By morning, the wedding no longer looked like a dream. It looked like a receipt with flowers taped to it. The first call came from the resort in Maui. Madison answered it in my parents' kitchen while I sat beside Grandma's hospice bed, watching sunlight gather weakly on the windowsill. I did not need to hear every word. Her voice told the story. It rose, cracked, then fell into panic. The remaining balance for the oceanfront ceremony was due by 5 in the afternoon. Without confirmation, the villa block, private beach dinner, and photographer package would be released. A day earlier, Madison had been floating through the backyard like a bride in a magazine. Now her perfect wedding had a deadline. Arthur Bell arrived before 10 with his briefcase and the stillness of a man who trusted paper more than noise. He had already contacted the title company, the real estate broker, and the buyer's attorney. The sale of the lake house had not fully closed. That was the first miracle. The second was uglier. My father had accepted an advance against the sale and used part of it to secure Madison's wedding package. Grandma listened with her eyes closed. So he sold tomorrow to decorate today, she said. Arthur nodded once. That is one way to put it. At 11:15, my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I answered because some part of me wanted to know whether Madison could finally say the truth without wrapping herself in tears. Claire, she sobbed, they are saying we might lose everything. I looked at Grandma. Her eyes remained closed, but her fingers moved slightly against the blanket. She was awake. Return the deposits you can, I said. You do not understand what this means to me. That sentence sat between us like something spoiled. I did understand. I had understood Madison my whole life. I understood her disappointments, her emergencies, her bad moods, her beautiful plans, her need to be chosen loudly. I understood her so completely that no one in my family had ever bothered to understand me. No, Madison, I said quietly. I think I finally do. She stopped crying for half a breath. Then anger slipped through. You are really doing this while Grandma is dying? My hand tightened around the phone. Dad did this while Grandma was dying. She hung up. By 3, Richard and Susan returned to hospice. They did not storm in this time. Consequences had taken the volume out of them. My father looked like he had slept in his clothes. My mother's makeup sat unevenly beneath her eyes, and she clutched a folder full of cancellation notices like it might protect her from what she had helped create. Dad placed the folder on the rolling table. We are reversing what we can, he said. Grandma opened her eyes. What does that mean? The Hawaii ceremony is cancelled, Susan whispered. The resort is keeping part of the deposit, but the rest will be returned. Her voice broke on the word returned. Not because the house had almost been stolen. Because the money had finally stopped moving toward Madison. Arthur took the folder and reviewed each page. Some vendor payments could be recovered. Some could not. Richard and Susan would have to repay the advance from their personal savings and sign an agreement covering the remaining fees. The lake house would be frozen legally until the estate documents were confirmed. Madison did not come with them. That hurt Grandma more than she showed. Where is your daughter? She asked. Dad's face tightened. She is devastated. Grandma looked toward the window. Claire was devastated too. She still came. No one answered that. Then my father tried one last time to sound like the man in charge. "Mom, are you really going to destroy Madison's wedding over an old lake house?" The room changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But something inside it turned cold and bright. Grandma slowly turned her head toward him. "No, Richard. You destroyed her wedding when you built it on Claire's inheritance." The words landed clean. Even my father could not move around them. Susan covered her mouth. Richard looked at the floor. For the first time, I saw the shape of their shame without their anger standing in front of it. Arthur removed a fresh document from his briefcase. "Margaret," he said gently, "I prepared the amendment you requested." Dad's head snapped up. "What amendment?" Grandma did not look at him. "Read it." Arthur read in a measured voice. "Because Richard Bennett and Susan Bennett attempted to sell designated property without lawful authorization, all discretionary inheritance previously assigned to them would be revoked. Those funds would be redirected into a trust for Claire Bennett for the maintenance, insurance, repair, and long-term preservation of the Bend Lake house. Richard would receive $1. Susan would receive $1. Madison would receive $1. My mother began crying again, but this time no one moved to comfort her. Dad stared at Grandma as if she had become a stranger. "You would do that to your own son?" Grandma's voice was barely more than breath, but it filled the room. "You did it to your own daughter." Silence followed. Deep. Final. I looked at Grandma's thin hand resting on the blanket and realized something that shook me harder than the betrayal. She had not made me powerful that day. She had only removed the people who had spent years convincing me I was powerless. Outside the window, the lavender bushes bent softly in the wind. Inside, for the first time, my family had nothing left to rename. Grandma Margaret passed away 11 days after the amendment was signed, with the morning light resting softly across her blanket and my hand wrapped around hers. The nurse called it peaceful. I did not know if loss could ever feel peaceful to the person left behind, but I knew this. Her room was quiet. Her face was calm. And the last clear thing she said to me was, "Open the windows at the lake again." At the funeral, Madison arrived in a plain navy dress, not the silk bridal gown she had been showing everyone the week before. The Maui wedding was gone. The private beach dinner was gone. The perfect sunset photographs were gone. She stood beside my parents near the chapel doors, looking smaller without all the beautiful things she had expected the world to place around her. My father wore a black suit and a face I barely recognized. Anger had always made him seem larger than he was. Without it, he looked tired, hollow, almost ordinary. My mother cried into a folded tissue and watched me like she was waiting for the right moment to turn grief into forgiveness. She found me near the guest book. "Claire," she whispered, "today is not the day for distance. We lost your grandmother. Can we just be family?" For years, that question would have pulled me back. I would have softened my voice. I would have swallowed my pain so no one else had to taste it. I would have pretended that being kind meant letting people step over the place where my heart had cracked. But grief had made something clear, not cruel. I looked at her and said, "Family does not use one daughter's memories as another daughter's decorations." Her face crumpled. This time, I let someone else comfort her. Madison approached me after the service, near the chapel steps where rain had darkened the stone. She kept both hands clasped in front of her, twisting her fingers until her knuckles turned pale. "I did not know it was legally yours," she said. I studied her face. For the first time, she looked less like my favored sister and more like someone who had been raised inside the same broken house from the better room. "You knew enough not to ask," I said. Her eyes filled with tears. Maybe they were real. Maybe they were only late. Either way, they were no longer mine to manage. The legal process took months. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no shouted confession under bright lights. Real consequences moved more quietly. Paper by paper. Signature by signature. Fee by fee. My parents repaid what they owed from their personal savings. The false authorization followed my father through every room where he had once enjoyed being respected. Relatives knew. The broker knew. His friends knew enough to stop asking for his version. And the lake house came back. The first time I drove to Bend alone, spring was just beginning to loosen winter from the trees. The road curved through dark pines, past open fields and silver patches of water. When I saw the house, my breath caught. It looked tired. The porch needed repair. The shutters were faded. Grass had grown high around the front steps. But it was still there. I unlocked the door with a key Arthur had given me. The hinges groaned softly, and the smell rushed out first. Pinewood. Dust. Old books. Faint lemon soap. Grandma. I stood in the entryway with my hand over my mouth, feeling years fold around me. Then I walked to the living room and opened the windows one by one, just as she had asked. Cool lake air moved through the house, lifting the curtains, touching the walls, waking up everything my family had tried to sell. In the kitchen cabinet, behind a stack of chipped blue plates, I found a small tin box. Inside was a photograph of me at 10 years old, sitting beside Grandma on the dock, both of us squinting into the sun. On the back, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "For the child who never asked for more, but deserved something of her own." That was when I cried. Not because of the house. Not because of the money. Because someone had seen me clearly enough to protect a place for me before I knew I was allowed to have one. I did not turn the lake house into a monument of revenge. I repaired the porch. I painted the shutters. I planted lavender by the steps because Grandma had loved the smell. Some evenings, I sat by the open window and listened to the water move in the dark, steady and patient, like a voice reminding me that peace is not always given. Sometimes it has to be claimed. If you were in Claire's place, would you forgive parents who sold your promised inheritance to build your sister's dream life, or would you let the legal papers speak for you? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to Still Waters Payback for more emotional stories where the truth finally comes home.